Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another wonderful book conversation. My name is Rohini. I am a storyteller and early years educator and the founder of NutSpace. And today we have a very, very special guest here with us. We have Pervin Saket, who's an author, a poet. She's an award winning poet. And we're going to be talking about a wonderful series of books that she's authored recently for children. But before we get started with that, I'd like to invite Pervin and so that she can introduce herself and talk a little about what she does and all that she has done, all the wonderful achievements that she's had so far. So over to you, Pervin.
Thank you. Thank you, Rohini, and thank you for having me here. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. Like you know, I have been working with children's books for a while, more in the education space, and it's wonderful now to be able to work on this series of very inspiring books. I have written pretty much all my life. I've been writing something or the other. I have a novel, Urmila, for adults. I have a collection of poetry called A Tinge of Turmeric. And yet, in spite of all those years of writing for adults, I can see how much more difficult it is to write for children. It's a whole different world, and it's a wonderfully exciting and challenging project to take up. So, looking forward to discussing those books with you.
That's great, and I'm glad you said this because a lot of times when people write for children, it seems like, oh, you write for children, okay, that must be really easy peasy, but it isn't. I think, and I'm glad you brought that up. To move on to the book set that I'd like to highlight today, this is Women in Science. It's a wonderful book set which has four books, and I'm going to just take you through these. This is Perseverance with Janaki Amal, and here we have Courage with Anandi Bai Joshi, we have Commitment with Diba Chaudhary, and we have Passion with Aditi Pant. And this is a book set, comes in this lovely case, and it's been published by AdiDev Press. So, Pervin, I'd like you to talk a little bit about these wonderful books. Since you've authored all four, please tell us a little bit about each one of these and the entire thought process behind bringing this out.
Right. Okay. So when Chitwan Mittal from Adidev Press, she spoke to me and said that she wanted to do a series of books that talk about the role models that we didn't have while growing up. Uh, People who have worked in important fields in India and women in particular. We didn't know their stories, and she wanted to bridge this gap. So when we started a conversation, I was really keen to begin with writing about some special women. And we decided to work on women in science. Women in science, there's a twofold reason for this. The first, of course, is that they have done some extraordinary work as scientists, and they have furthered the field in ways which are remarkable. But other than that, in order to do this work itself, they have had to break social taboos. They have inspired social and cultural change in order to become these scientists. And therefore, they have a twofold inspiration behind them. They've contributed significantly to science, and they have also changed the way their immediate environment responded to them. They have changed the way we perceive of women playing roles nowadays, especially in STEM. So it is very exciting for me to take their stories and make that accessible and available for children. So yes, that was the reasoning behind these books, and I selected four scientists based on a lot of things. We Lots of research went into options, but finally, with these four, there was a very clear arc and a narrative and a very meaningful value that stood out for me. and that combination finally made the decision for us.
Yeah, it's wonderful that you've spoken about how in our growing up years, there were
Hmm.
struggles for women, and now too. But there were hardly any women role models for us, at least when I was growing up, and when I was going through the timelines in these books. At least for two of these, I realized that this was when I was a child. So this is where, when I was a child, when I was growing up, these women were breaking barriers, they were breaking stereotypes, they were going
Correct.
out there, and I didn't even hear of them. I did not know, and to be honest, I only heard of them when I read these books, which is a pity. And I think AdiDev is doing a great job to change the narrative now and focus on Indian women role models. um, Another
Absolutely.
thing that you mentioned, while you were introducing the book set, was the research. You narrowed it down to these four. So, how did you start, and what was the process? Could you tell us a little about that?
Yes, yes. So I started without any preconceived ideas. I wanted to see what was available in terms of which women were being written about and which women were not quite being written about. So when you go to search, you'll find that there are lots of articles about certain scientists. And of course, when we say women scientists, you're going to see Marie Curie pop up, but very few women in India. And even within that, there were those who, there's just a mention somewhere. But then a little more further digging, and you discover that, okay, they've worked on very important projects. Like, for instance, Biba Chaudhry, who's a physicist, she worked on projects where her teams went on to win significant prizes. Her team member, her co-scientist, won the Nobel Prize, and she's not mentioned anywhere. And she was as much a part of that research. So these were the things that finally made the decision for me that I want to write about the women who have not had their time, who've not had their stories being talked about, and who have persisted in spite of that. They have not, it has not deterred their work in any way. Their dedication and commitment was so clear that even in the face of obvious discrimination like this, they still persisted. So this was the main factor in deciding how to guide the research in order to select our final four scientists.
It's great that you mentioned that, especially about Viva Chaudhary, and the lesser
Hmm.
known, the ones who didn't get recognition, and you wanted to bring them to the forefront. Which brings me to the next point, which is, in the title itself, there are these values: commitment,
Yes.
and then there's courage, and there's perseverance, and there's passion. And you've spoken right now about all of these, this book series and the whole research and the selection process with a lot of passion yourself. But I think these are the key values that you've highlighted, even within the narrative in the story itself. But just wanted to ask, when you are writing about values for children like this, so um, where and how do you draw the line about not making it like a lecture, and
Hmm.
instead, inspire them? How did you think
Absolutely.
about that? Did you have that in mind?
Very much so, because as a child, I was myself very resistant to any value education or anything that is even remotely in that shape of personality development. I would get very annoyed if there was any preaching and
Yeah.
lecturing on being a good girl. So I totally understood that, and the last thing we wanted was for the book to appear that way. Even today, even as an adult, I'm very skeptical about uh, gyan. I am very uh, receptive towards questions and very suspicious of answers. If somebody is asking questions, I'm drawn to them. If someone is holding forth on answers, I don't take that very seriously. So I did not want that that should be a barrier, because there are minds like that, and there are very curious, fascinating minds like that. And we need to reach out and connect with those children as well. So, what we hope to do, what I wanted to do was to tell the story and allow the value to come through very gently, very quietly within that story itself. And by illustrating the value as part of the story, we are not, stating that the value is always applicable as something to live up to no matter what the situation. We are showing how, in this person's life, in this person's situation, this is the value that they embodied, and this is what helped them overcome their challenges. So, a value that's applicable for one person need not be applicable for another person. And that is one way of uh, recognizing and articulating that values are not absolute. What is right for one person may not work otherwise. So, I remember I've had a fabulous education. I went to a very nice school, and I'm very grateful for that. But we had a motto, and the motto of our school was others. And others is a very noble value system to have. But this is a girls' school. And in India, as you know, many girls are still in only perhaps their second generation going to school, at the most, third generation going to school, sometimes even less than that. And girls have to, as part of the goal of their education, it is to break away from traditional expectations of placing others first, of not giving importance to their dreams, their feelings, their direction in life. So I knew that it was a misfit. Fortunately, we didn't, as girls, we didn't take it very seriously, but we did feel guilty about not taking it seriously. So for me, it's very important to make sure that the value is relevant for that person, and also specific to a situation. It is not something that you may want to uphold always. It is something that is tuned to that life, that circumstance, that opportunity, that career. So, and that is one way in which I thought of certain guidelines for my own self while putting these stories together.
um, Very well said about values not being absolute. In fact, at NutSpace we work on building life skills in children using stories, and I think stories are a wonderful way to build life skills in children without sermonizing, without making the narrative preachy, which is exactly what I've read the books, but then just I wanted to ask you the question because sometimes that may tell off as the first impression. Just also wanted to add one more thing to that. When you were talking about women, and I'm so glad that you shared your personal story about the school motto, and how sometimes certain things are sort of put into our heads as children in our growing up years, and they stay with us. And the guilt that you spoke of, I think it's so common, for a woman to live with that guilt. Okay, so others before self. And I think these
Yes,
stories that you've shared over here, I think there's been struggle for all four of these women. Some of them didn't even get recognition, and I think that has come out really beautifully. Before I ask you more questions, I'd like to show the books, the illustrations, to everyone who's here. So I'll start with
yes,
the first one. This is Passion with Aditi Pant, and these are again books. These are board books in board book format, and very beautifully illustrated. This has been illustrated by Bosky Jain, and very child friendly, lovely, bright illustrations. And again, not a lot of text. So, and text written in rhyme and rhythm. And what I really like is this timeline that is there toward the end. So, which is, even if stuff is not covered here in the story, the timeline kind of talks about what really happened in this person's life, which gives the reader a little bit of an idea about when the person was born and what they did, what they achieved, the ups and downs, and the main highlights of their lives. So similarly, and this one has been illustrated by Ananda Menon. So there are different illustrators for each title, and Pervin has authored all four. And here is the timeline for Janaki. This is Anandi Bai Joshi. And again, this one has been illustrated by Sriya Singh. And here is the timeline for Anandi Bai. And this one is Biba Chaudhary. And this one has been illustrated by Sahitya Rani. And you can see
Yes.
it's really very beautifully, all four of them have been very beautifully illustrated, and that's the timeline here.
Could you,
So I
Rohini,
wanted to ask you,
could you
yes.
show could you show in the last one in Biba Chaudhary, could you show the page where she's in the shadow?
Yeah.
Just to give an idea of how the illustration and the story have been linked, you'll see that here. Thank you, Rohini. You'll see that here, the physicist that she worked with, Powell, received the Nobel Prize, and she didn't, which is why our illustrator put her face in the shadow over there. And I think with board books and picture books, the illustrations make all the difference, and all four of them are absolutely fabulous. They brought their own signature styles to the book, and that has forwarded the story in a way that just words would not be able to.
Right, you're absolutely right. I think in an illustrated picture book, the illustrations play a very big role because there is some amount of storytelling happening in the text, but there's a lot of storytelling parallelly happening through the pictures. And I think this was, of course, the publisher's call, I'm sure, to have a different illustrator for every story, which has worked really beautifully because they've brought out different things, and they've added their unique flavor to each story.
Absolutely, because I think, like for instance, with Aditi Pant, there was an energy. There was an interesting energy because she's doing something really different. She's more modern. She's still alive. She's a little more recent, and Chitwan and her team wanted a certain tone and mood to the illustrations. Whereas for Biba Chaudhary, it's more meditative, more pensive. So I think it was wonderful that all four illustrators brought their unique styles to it, and they therefore allowed the books to all hold together as a set and yet have a different energy.
Yes, yes. So they are independent of each other, yet they are together as a set.
Yes,
Again, traditionally, if you look at books, at least that's been my experience, and I'm sure others may differ. But a board book format written in rhyme and rhythm and with illustrations, a four color illustration with each book is usually perceived as a very for very young children. So, but what's the age group that is there that is being given for this, or what age group did you have in mind? Because honestly, before you even add, honestly, for me too, I think I loved these, and I think they work for kids as well as adults. But what did you have in mind when you were authoring these?
we I had in mind 4+ as the age group, and I want to say 4+, and I don't want to put an upper limit there because I think the best children's books are those which are also enjoyed by adults. And I felt very comforted when my adult friends and family around me, they started getting into the books with great enthusiasm. So 4+ would be the right age, and I think at 4 they're mostly figure working through the story with the illustrations and perhaps with someone reading it out. And as the child gets older, the child is able to independently read the book as well. And you'll notice that the level is such that we have not made it very we didn't want to dumb it down. I didn't want to dumb it down at all. Didn't want to make it talk down to the child. So I have not shied away from using big words, words like commitment, words like perseverance, because the world that the child lives in is the same world that the adult lives in. It's filtered very gently, and I didn't want an artificial filter to be placed in the book. So while the child will may not be able to figure out commitment as a concept they get a sense of it through her story, through the way she continued in spite of challenges. So, so that was the balance that I was going for, which is that complex mental and emotional ideas and a straightforward style. And the straightforward style came from the rhyme, it came from the poetry. By using rhythms, patterns, the expectation that comes with rhyme, we're able to use a structure or a format which is accessible and enjoyable, and at the same time, gently bring in more complex um, social and social issues or scientific workings or emotional processes of the character. I was able to bring that in by with this balance.
That's great. And even though you say it's 4 plus, my daughter's 3 and she has thoroughly enjoyed all 4 books. And
Wonderful.
she loves to look at the illustrations, and she loves the to look at the fish in the ocean and Aditi Pant, the book.
Yes.
So I think these books appeal to all ages. I wanted to also know, out of all 4, I'm sure you have a favorite, and which one would that be?
That is a tough one, actually. Uh, they're all very close to my heart, and I feel like they've all become my friends, all these women in some way. But I'll say, with respect to where I am now in my life, uh, I feel very close to Biba Chaudhry because I'm amazed at how she persisted with her work in the absence of recognition. So much so that it was almost like it wasn't a consideration. It wasn't, she was not doing this because, or she was not, she didn't even need the encouragement or the reward of being acknowledged for the honest work that she's doing. It was almost like the way when I read her story, it almost felt like a personal sadhana or a spiritual or a Zen process of her own, where she's so lost in her research and in her work that it's immaterial what people think or don't think, say or don't say. She persisted through all of that. So that kind of connection with the work, so much that you're oblivious to how it is received, whether you are talked about, the fact that your colleagues and teammates get recognition and you didn't. She seemed totally unfazed by it. Of course, I'm projecting because she's not talked about it directly, but she seemed like she's going to work regardless. And that is a very big inspiration for me. So that is
Be
something that
wonderful.
at this point is close to my heart.
Right,
Yes.
I'm sure. And when you were talking about this, I was reminded of another series by AdiDev itself. I worked on the lesson plans for those, and I did some storytelling with those titles. That was another book set, part of the Learning to Be series only. And
Okay.
there was Seva with Guru Nanak, and that also talks about values. And you were talking about sadhana and doing your own thing without really wanting that recognition, but doing it because probably that's what you're supposed to do at that point in time. And when you were talking about it, I was reminded of that value that came out in that book set for me.
Yeah. Yeah. It almost seemed like it wasn't a job or a profession or a career. It was like a calling,
Calling.
like just a calling that's bigger than all these considerations.
Yeah, so it's more
And
like selfless, service without bothering about recognition. I'm so glad
oh,
that you shared that, Pervin. So, what else is in the pipeline? I know that you're working on another book set. Could you share something about that with
yes,
Edtech?
so we uh, recently, very just a few days ago, released the next book set, which is Women in Sports, which I'm really excited about. And we have 4 books in Women in Sports. We have Trust with PT Usha, Resilience with Bhakti Sharma, Adaptability with Arunima Sinha, and Transformation with Chandro and Prakashi Tomar. So, actually 5 fabulous sportswomen who also have very inspiring lives and have persisted in the face of lots of difficulties and have excelled in their sports. And they're all very different sports, right from sharpshooting to like adaptability with Arunima Sin. Arunima began as a volleyball player. She was a national level volleyball player. And once while traveling by train at night, someone tried to snatch her bag and she got into a fight with that the group. And in the process, she was pushed out of the train and she lost her leg. And imagine for a volleyball player to lose her leg. And she went on to have a second career as a mountaineer. And she climbed all this peaks, highest peaks in all the continents of the world. And she was the first female amputee to climb Mount Everest. So in her life, she spanned two careers, overcoming this adverse, the adversity. So, and of course, Chandra and Prakashi Tomar, who are two sisters-in-law who started sports after they were 60 years old. And I'll let you discover their story, but they are absolutely fascinating. So this is the next set that you can expect.
How absolutely exciting. I can't wait to read these stories. And thanks for giving us a glimpse of the books. You said that they have been recently released, and are they available for sale?
They have just been available.
Oh,
Yes, yes.
wonderful. So anybody who's tuning in can look them up, and I'm sure they'd love to discover these beautiful stories as well, apart from women in science, of course. So I think it's time for us to wrap up. But before we wind up, Pervin, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you, talking about your personal stories and your journey through these inspiring stories.
Thank
Um,
you.
there are educators and parents who are going to be, if not tuning in at the moment, but who are going to be watching this later. Is there a message that you have for them?
I do actually. Actually, this message is not from me. It is from the 6-year-old me, the me that used to be, which is please let children read uncensored, uninhibited, unmoderated. Uh, and we're so cautious about the right book at the right time that we don't quite realize that uh, our minds are already going to do this work for us. I think one of the reasons why I have become I still read um, like I read hundred like poems, stories, everything, and I write so much is because I never had someone saying this is a good thing to read or the right thing to read. Parents and teachers, librarians, we often want children to read so that they learn. They either learn something or they become better people or they get some values or they get uh, some skills. We have a matlabi reason for making that child read, and I think we have to break that and allow them to read just to read, and all these things will naturally come in. They are inevitable. We Books will become the best friends and they will become mentors, they will become teachers for your children without you having uh, to do that little bit of the middleman process. So don't push them to read to be better at anything. They're fabulous by themselves. Let them enjoy the pleasures of reading and everything that you want from them. And you want that relationship with books is anyway going to come naturally as part of that connection with the written word. So relax, breathe. I read the way a goat eats. I read everything. And I was just telling someone that if I'm brushing my teeth, I'll read the toothpaste. If I'm stuck in traffic, I will read the number plates, and that is because it's become an instinctive orientation. Because this kind of proper organized, this is right for you, this is good for you, this kind of thing was not there. And when it does come in, it creates a barrier in your relationship with books. So you can breathe easy, you can relax, your children are going to be wonderful people. They just have to fall in love with books, all books. Thank
Very
you.
well said. Very well said. I think a lot of times, we have these vested interests that, oh, if you read, your vocabulary will be good, and this and that and the other, comprehension and the works. But reading for the joy of reading is, I think, the most important thing. And I'm so glad that you spoke about, this is good for you and this is not, because a lot of times parents do, come up with, oh, I don't like this series because I think my child is becoming very aggressive by reading it. And I think we're being very overprotective that we choose, what they're reading. You're right. I think just let them be and navigate the book
Yeah.
waters and stories themselves. And I think that's the best way to be. Thank you so much, Pervin. It was absolutely wonderful to have you here as part of this book conversation. And I'm sure.
Likewise, Rohini, thank you for having me here. I had a wonderful conversation.
Thank you so much. And I'm sure everybody who picks up these books will definitely value them, treasure them. And I'm really looking forward to the next book set. So thank you so much to AdiDev Press as well for bringing out these wonderful titles. Thank you, Pervin, and have a lovely festive season ahead. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.